Hello, you join me in Rome this morning. We've been walking around looking at some buildings. We've seen the Santa Maria degli Angeli, we have seen the Roman forums, and we've seen the Capitolium. So, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels and the Martyrs occupies the Cella Calidaria of the Baths of Diocletian, a section of the remaining structure of the Roman baths, which was designed by Michelangelo in 1563-1564 to adapt it to a Christian worship. The Great Hall of the Baths was preserved and converted into a Greek cross with a vaulted transept. The transept gives a striking display of the magnificent scale of Roman constructions, almost 91 meters long. Michelangelo made the transept 27 meters wide, thus providing vast cubical spaces at each end of the transept. Having no true facade, the exterior is unique for a church, as the outer walls of the Baths of Diocletian are partially preserved in the overall complex. However, the church has no civic presence as such, since the 16th century Baroque facade was demolished in the 20th century to expose the surviving wall of the caldarium. At Santa Maria degli Angeli, Michelangelo achieved an unexampled sequence of shaped architectural spaces with few precedents or followers by preserving the existing structure of Roman baths and integrating it in his design. Colosseum, an oval amphitheater situated just east of the Roman Forum, commissioned in AD 72 and completed in AD 80, measuring 189 by 156 meters in plan and 48 meters in height, and a seating capacity of 65,000 spectators on average. Through the centuries, Colosseum was used for various purposes, so the building suffered multiple minor interventions, which have consequently affected the building structure. In medieval times, it was damaged by multiple lightning strikes and earthquakes, but most damaging of all, it was used as a quarry and a handy source of building materials. By the 19th century, Colosseum was in such poor condition that preservation and restoration works were urgently needed. The first conservation works were proposed to be undertaken in 1806, when the outer ring of the building started separating from the inner ring, which caused debate over how it could be preserved. A number of proposals were submitted. However, the winning proposal by the architects Stern, Camporesi and Palazzi suggested adding a brick buttress to stop the separation of the outer ring and connect it with a cross wall to the inner structure of the building. This idea was criticized in the name of picturesque and romantic qualities of the ruin, which would be spoiled by the monstrous buttress. However, to conserve the romantic idea of the ruin, the architects made the stones condensed within the brick structure, looking like they are falling and moving. In 1823, architect Giuseppe Valadier took charge of the recovery of the northwest side of the outer ring. The intervention consisted in a new spur, in this case realized with the arches completely identical to the original. The addition was built using brick for economic reasons, with the exception of the bases and the capitals of travertine.
Pantheon is the most well-preserved ancient building in Rome. It is a sacred building which, as the name suggested, was formerly dedicated to all the gods. Pantheon is well known for its dome structure. The dome, which is supported by a huge iron-core cylinder, has a diameter of 43 meters. The thickness of the wall in the base of the dome is 6 meters. However, the top part is only 1.5 meter thick. That allows for the dome to be self-supported. The height of dome is almost equal to its diameter. On the top of the dome there is a big hole, the so-called oculum, with a diameter of 8.9 meters, which is the only natural source of light in the building. With the change of 4 seasons, the angles of sunshine differ, so the sunpath is projected on the dome's interior. The collaboration between rotunda and the domes have influenced many contemporary public spaces, such as government buildings, universities, libraries, and more. Almost 2,000 years after it was built, the Pantheon dome is still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome.
Hello, we are today on the rooftop of Notre Dame University in Rome, and we have visited the Colosseum and the Arch of Titus, and we've been focusing on preservation.
The Max Planck Institute for the History of Art, located between Palazzo Saccari and Palazzo Stroganoff in Rome, was threatened with closure because of the previous library structure no longer complied with the fire safety standards and had stability problems, as well as a lack of space for the growing number of books in the library. Juan Navarro Baldaveg's project managed to combine the tradition and history. These constraints for the protection and cultural heritage presented a real challenge for the architects. As the facades of the building couldn't be touched, it wasn't possible to use traditional foundations because of the remains of the villa. An ancient fountain and magnificent mosaics were unearthed at the subterranean site in addition to the remains of a villa and landscape gardens. To avoid these, a 3-metre high box of reinforced concrete was mounted onto 178 micropiles, embedded 50 metres into the ground, placed along the exterior facade, carrying the enormous weight of the building. Visitors to the library can admire the archaeological zone through a glazed-in underground gallery. With this sensitivity and a strong feel for the particular tradition of the location, the new library stands out impressively and forms the centrepiece of the Hertziana. Opening up the former garden of the Palazzo Saccari in the form of an interior courtyard and incorporating the famous 16th century Moor of Hell as the entranceway. The Aropakis Museum by Richard Meyer rises between a roadway that runs along the Tiber and the ancient mausoleum of Augustus below, and boasts a muscular main hall built to house the Aropakis, an altar as a symbol of Roman peace around 9 BC. Meyer intervened when the old building, built by Morpurgo for Mussolini, fell into disrepair. Meyer's design shows a certain insensitivity towards its physical and cultural context, and its relationship to the beauty of the dense and richly textured city around it, and tends to reinforce the cliché that all contemporary architecture is an expression of an architect's self-importance. The building's glass and travertine shell has all of Meyer's usual flourishes and signature style, from the expansive use of glass to obsessive grids. However, these grids cast uneven shadows that respond badly to the Roman altar. The structure stands up to the sculpture's weight and stark power, which attempts to take over the centre stage. The main hall, supported by 4 heavy white columns that rise to meet a grid of deep beams, show no response to the context around the building or the altar. Through his building in the city's ancient fabric, the travertine wall extends from the museum's main entrance to the roadway beside the river. But when viewed from the road, the wall chops off the view of the churches, so you don't feel the full effect of the surprise of them coming into view. Meyer's project overwhelms the piazza below and seems quite disrespectful. The building and the entrance plaza, with its serene water feature, which at first seems like a nice detail, don't seem to respond to the axes, levels and lines set up by the buildings and plazas around it.
Borromini's complexity and genius of his built form came mainly through his geometrical manipulations. Mathematics was the main inspiration for his proportions. He gained this understanding whilst in Lombardy, studying the work of master masons who had been building centuries before. Hence, through his architecture, we can see a vastly intricate range of geometrical manipulations that allowed him to create some of the most intelligent architectural articulations of his day. The size of the site at San Carlo was very limiting. The architect not only had to provide a church, but also a cloister, crypt, also known as the lower church, middle rooms, and a garden. Hence, the brilliance of the architecture is how Borromini creates a space that feels much larger than it is. He does this through manipulating the classical orders, much common to the Baroque, but he does so in a way that creates such a sense of movement and height, climaxing in a coffered ovular dome. The decoration of the dome is a form of coffering, based on a pattern which goes back ultimately to an early Christian mosaic on the vault of San Costanza, of which a variant was engraved by Serlio, but Borromini was the first architect to use it in 3 dimensions, and on a dome rather than a barrel vault. The columns of the church are set into the walls so that they provide strength and structure, but don't interrupt with the movement of the space, and the monochromatic use of colour on the interior blends the elaborate decoration into a unified whole. Similar brilliance of design exists in the flow of the cloister's balustrade, the articulation of the niches in the lower church below, the upside-down volutes of its Corinthian columns, and the expression contained within the shelled niches of the chapel. Everything is achieved by the design of the detail. Overall, the beauty of the church is a testament to Borromini's unquestionable ability to create ultimately intelligent and spatially complex architecture.
We visit the Church of Santa Maria della Vittoria, Our Lady of Victory in English. It is a small church with a masterpiece of sculpture known as the Ecstasy of Santa Teresa, made by Bernini. From an architectural aspect, it is the only structure designed and completed by the early Baroque architect Cola Maderino in 1605. Located in Rome, Italy, the Johnson was also inspired by this church a lot when he visits Italy. Moreover, the interior of this small church is one of Rome's most successful example of uniform Baroque decoration. Rebuilt in the early 1990s, there is very little natural light inside the church, and most of area are filled with candles, which create a very special feeling to visitors. The sunlight through the colorful windows above the sculpture of Santa Teresa, expressing a sense of sacredness. The use of different light created by the exterior light funnel inspired some of Song's use of light in the Bank of England.
After having a tiring and fulfilling time in Rome, it's now time to go separate ways. Some of us ended up in the Vatican, Naples, and Verona, where we visited Castle Vecchio, and finally Venice.
Until I found someone.
Castle Vecchio, Old Castle in Italian, was constructed as a military defense by the then ruling family in Verona, known as Scaliger in the Middle Ages. The castle stands as a prominent figure that represents Gothic architecture of the age. Compared to other architecture found around Italy, it has minimal decorative features and constructed using basic elements such as red bricks, which can be seen throughout Verona. Carlo Scarpa was a 20th century Venetian architect who worked mainly to restore and intervene with historic buildings and to give it a new life. His material knowledge was vast and every detail was given attention to. Unlike many other architects at the time who overlooked the craftsmen, he on the other hand worked together collaboratively with them to reproduce old elements and materials using a wider spectrum of colors and texture to give a whole new meaning and understanding. The ghost's fountain, mirrored by other small fountains, have been carefully placed on top of the reserved water to give the illusion of floating and to clarify the space around it, almost making it seem pure. He created a carefully planned paving full of geometry to direct viewers to the main entrance. The internal gallery space had been remodeled by previous architects. The most dominant feature of the remodeling included a wooden beam that stood proud supporting the upper levels. Although Scarpa was not fond of the work that had been done to restore the gallery space, he understood the importance of the beams as it gave the space a sense of direction. The solution for Scarpa was to lower the ceilings and replace the wooden beams with steel beams, which spanned across from one gallery to the other, acting as an element which connected all the spaces together.
After a short break, we are finally reunited in Venice.
The Fondaco di Tedeschi is one of Venice's largest and most recognisable buildings. Twice destroyed by fire, manipulated in the 18th century, and then subject to a series of architectural interventions in the 20th century to accommodate the central post office under the fascist regime. The Fondaco quietly embodies Venice's secret brutality, with its preservation spanning 5 centuries of construction techniques. The building's legal status of monument was granted in 1987 and forbid almost any future changes. The courtyard piazza is opened up to pedestrians, maintaining its historical role of covered urban campo. The new rooftop is created by the renovation of the existing 19th century pavilion, standing over a grid of steel and glass, which hovers above the central courtyard, responding to the rhythm of the archways overlooking the courtyard. The addition of a large wooden terrace offers a new vantage point over the city. The rooftop and the courtyard below are public venues, open to the city and accessible at all times. New entrances to the building are created from the Campo San Bartolomeo and the Rialta. Existing entrances into the courtyard have been retained. Escalators have been added to create a new public route through the building. Rooms are consolidated in a way that respects the original sequences. This project avoids nostalgic reconstructions of the past, demystifies the sacred image of a historical building, and adds yet another chapter of the building's illustrious and multi-layered history.
St. Mark's Basilica is the cathedral church of the Archdiocese of Venice in northern Italy. It is the most famous of the city's churches and one of the best known examples of Italo-Byzantine architecture. The cathedral lies at the eastern end of the Piazza San Marco and is connected to the Doge's palace. Originally, it was the chapel of the Doge and was a temporary building until it was constructed in 828. This was a replacement by a new church on its present site in 832, alongside a bell tower known as St. Mark's Campoli. The new church was burned in a rebellion in 976 and rebuilt in 978, and again to form the basis of the present basilica in 1063. While the basic structure of the building has been much altered, its decoration changed greatly over time. Succeeding centuries, especially the 14th, all contributed to the adornment, especially from the Crusades. The loot from these crusades brought columns, capitals and friezes taken from some ancient buildings to add to the fabric of the basilica. Gradually, the exterior brickwork became covered with various marbles and carvings, some much older than the building itself. Once you step inside this phenomenal church, you can tell from its opulent design, gold-crowned mosaics, that it was a status and a symbol of Venetian wealth and power. In an attempt to stabilize the Roman Empire after the crisis of the 3rd century, the Emperor Diocletian imposed a new imperial office structure, a 4 co-emperor office ruling called the Tetrarchy. The famous porphyry statue of the 4 tetrarchs represents the independence of the 4 rulers. It was taken from Constantinople during the 4th Crusade in 1204, and it was set into the southwest corner of the basilica. Part of the missing foot of one of the figures was discovered in Istanbul in the 1960s and is still on display, clarifying the original location of the works.
So after our incredible time in Rome and Venice, we'd like to thank Pepon Aldrich for taking us around the site, and we look forward to reflecting on these in our future projects.